think we're ready.
Okay, good. Well, let me call the meeting to order and welcome everybody to our first Friday afternoon board meeting. I'm glad everybody, I set 2 alarm clocks to make sure I'd remember. So I'm glad everybody made it. And Peter, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Epstein,
Here.
Schroeder,
Here.
Rotunda,
Here.
Perot.
Yeah.
And Dornberg here. All present and accounted for.
Okay, and do you have any announcements, Eric?
Just remind everybody we're using Zoom webinars, which is different than what we have done mostly in the past. So you will be required to use the raise your hand function if you'd like to speak.
Okay.
Okay, really?
Not the board, just the public. Peter.
Oh, okay.
Yes, Peter, you may speak at any moment you desire.
All right.
Okay, let me now see if there's any corrections to the agenda or the consent calendar. Okay, I don't hear any. So let me move on now and see if there's any comments from the audience, an opportunity for members of the public to discuss something that is not on the agenda.
Beth McAllister would like to speak.
Okay, Beth, the floor is yours. Just unmute yourself.
Thank you. I
There you
wasn't
go.
sure if Sandy Goldberg was on, so.
She is not.
Oh, okay, great. I just wanted to go on record to say that we've made really good progress. We worked on Firewise. We worked with Chief Ansel and we developed a final draft of our application. And now we have sent that final draft application off to CAL FIRE and the Alpine and Amador County Fire Safe Councils for their review. And we'll be ready to apply to the NFPA by March 1st. And one of the major components of the application is education. And to that end, our website is really going to be critical to achieve our education goals. And we'll also need some printed materials. And I wanted to go on the record to say that we plan to respectively request a small startup grant from the 501c3 organization for the website and for these printed materials.
Okay. And Eric, is there any particular procedure that Beth needs to know about to do that?
If you just send me something, because actually you're lucky because Eric's on the meeting right now as well, but Eric, Peter, and I are the board for the 501c3, not this board. So if you send it to me, I'll make sure and circulate that.
Okay. And then you would just arrange a special meeting or as appropriate.
Right.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Beth. Thanks for the update, and please thank the committee for the amount of work that you've accomplished. It's really terrific.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands up for comments from the audience. Were there any written comments?
If there were, they
In the
would have been
packet?
put in the packet, and I don't see any.
I didn't see any. Okay. So let's now move to item 7, adoption of the consent calendar, which includes the regular minutes, claims for consent, receivables, reauthorizing the teleconference meetings, approving Eric Rickard as a community member on the Communications Committee, and also Ann Fleur Dwyer as a community member on the Planning Committee. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar?
Moved.
Hey, Doug moves.
That was Doug, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Dornberg seconds, okay. Peter, can you do the roll call, please?
Sure. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Rotunda,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye. It's unanimous.
Okay, great. So there are no items brought forward for separate discussion. So we're now ready for item 9, finance update. Kelly.
So we're going to go through this quickly unless you have any questions, except for there's one thing that we wanted to point out. If you go to the electric fund on page 23 of your packet, you'll notice that there is a variance to budget and cost of goods sold. this seems like there might have been a price hike or something like that, but this is actually just a budgeting issue. We budgeted less per kilowatt hour through the electric rate study than we had in the past. And we budgeted, I believe it was like 6 cents a kilowatt hour for purchased power. And it's actually more along the lines of 8.5 cents a kilowatt hour, which is what we had budgeted in the past. So there hasn't been a change in pricing. It was just a change in the amount that we budgeted. So we just wanted to make that clear for everybody that, you know, not to get worried that, you know, the price of electricity has gone up. We just budgeted for less, and that will be corrected in the next budget. So are there any other questions about finances for the month of December?
Kelly, so the shortfall is all in reduced usage and higher operating and maintenance?
The shortfall in
Well,
electric?
we're down on operating from plan.
Yes, it's due to the fact that we, you know, a large portion of that you can see is the purchase power, but also with, you know, with less electric revenue. So those are the two things really.
Well, I'd like to add that you have to remember that in July, yes, we did not collect as much as we had should because we are on the old system and the base rate were not increased. So it had a cost actually to it. So do you remember what I'm meaning, Bob?
Yes, but we did budget July differently than August because we knew that was going to happen.
Okay.
So I think the budget already accounted for that, Bertrand.
Okay.
It did.
Okay. All right, so no one should panic.
Right.
Okay, got it. All right, are there specific questions for Kelly on other parts
I don't know
of the
if it's
financial?
a question for Kelly on that specific front, but if we were budgeting 6.8 and we are 8.5, does that change the avoided cost for the electrical rate?
I'm not sure the answer to that question, Bob. I don't know if you have a better answer.
I'm not sure I understand that. I don't understand what the question is
Okay,
exactly.
I'm rephrasing.
Yeah,
So
okay.
we came up with 13.7 and 14.7 if you include the 1 cent for renewable. And that, as I'm assuming, when you did this calculation, it was using 6.8 cents as a cost of good. And if it turned out it's 8.5, not 6.8, I just wonder if our calculation for the avoided cost is correct or incorrect. It certainly should be looked at, in my opinion.
Yeah, I'll double check, but we used 8 cents for the actual rate study.
Okay.
So I believe the problem is only in comparison to budget and not to our expected revenue and margin.
That's correct, Bob.
Okay. All right. So, thanks for the question, though.
Yeah.
That would be bad. Okay. Are there any other questions then regarding the financial statements?
I do have actually a few questions and comments.
Okay, go ahead.
If you go page 29, here, yeah, at the top, yeah. So here we are, and we compare. Maybe you wanted to say something on this page before I go forward. You were done, Kelly.
No, it's just a comparison from last year to this year. So
it does change because we change our electrical rate. So this is combined, but you can see the difference we have here is it shows commercial is 600 less than last year, 600,000, and residential is 300 less, and that's in the usage side of things. And if you go to base rate, we show 1.2 million more in base rate collection. So similar occupancy, similar actually usage. So I'm basically, I think most of the change in the base rate is coming from the change in the electrical rate structure.
100%.
Yeah, and don't forget there's a 7% increase.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, so my first question / request is, now that the base rate is so important, I mean, in percentage, I think we need to start spelling out what's commercial base rate and what's residential base rate, because it's very difficult to be able to assess the commercial versus the residential. And it's actually based on what we'll be discussing later. It's going to be an interesting parameter to look at. And we need, my request is that from now on, we should have a base rate commercial and a base rate, 2 lines, basically, base rate residential for this kind of comparison. So that's what I want to say.
That would require me to change the actual report in PCS, which is very easy. I mean, our commercial and residential base rates are recorded in separate accounts.
Mm-hmm.
So it's very easy to change that, but it wouldn't just be for the comparison, it would be for all the reports, just so you know. It would just list them separately, but that's very easy because we already record the actual commercial and residential base rates in separate accounts. So very easy to do.
Yeah, that's great, because, and I want to have opinion from other board member, but I think at this stage, since we are looking at base rate and commercial versus residential, now we cannot do any work with the number because they are mingled together. So I think it'd be a good value. And if it's easy to do, this is great. And I think, yes, it's actually better that it's always keep separated. The second thing I want to ask on this page is, why are base rate increase greater than the usage cost prediction? So I thought we were going for neutral when we did that rate structure, and I think that's what we try to do. And here, that's not the case. So we actually, and again, I suspect it's coming from the change in electricity, but clearly that the weight of commercials has decreased based on the electricity thing. If I go to the electricity page and I compare to 2021, the commercial usage was 1.13, and the residential was 0.49, and the base rate was 100,000 or 0.1, all in millions. That's for a total of
Sorry, Bertrand, you've 100% lost me. I have no, like, I
start again.
I think we're getting off of the financial reporting. This is like a whole nother topic. So I don't know that this is appropriate to keep going down this path, Bob.
Is your question how things have shifted between commercial and residential?
It looks like they have shifted. So I think we need to look at that. That's basically why I want to cover. Right. I don't expect an answer today because the base rate has commingled. Are mingled together, but it looks like there was a shift, and commercial has paid less than residential with a new rate structure. And I'd like to be able to delve into this number and try to understand how that works.
Okay, why don't we follow up on that and see what we can pull together. Okay.
Yeah, as a little tidbit. So you said there was a 7% increase. So by my calculation, the rate for, if you include the base rate, the rate for the 4.7 gigawatt hours that we consume in 2021 fiscal year, and that was up to January. I'm sorry, it's a fiscal year. I compare the fiscal year from July 2021 to December 2021 to the same thing to 2020. So in this case, we consume a little more, 4.7 gigawatt hour in the previous year and a little less this current year, 4.5. But the cost was lower in 2021. So basically, if you put this number together, we end up with an 43 cents kilowatt hour rate in this year. Last year was 38 cents, 39. So that's an 11% increase. So one more reason I'd like to be able to delve in this number, see what's happening here and try to understand this thing here.
Okay, so we'll follow up on those questions. Okay, is there anything else on the finances? And if not, can we move on to the January preliminaries?
Sure.
Page 30.
So operating revenues for the month of January were better than planned by $35,000. And a lot of that has to do with late penalty revenue for one of our biggest customers paying late. Year to date, operating revenues are down from plan by about $43,000. And those are actuals. So any questions on preliminary income statement for January?
Okay, there aren't any, so let's move on to cash flow.
Cash flow for the month of January, we ended at 1.9 million in total operating cash, which was down from plan by about $330, which is about the total bill of what was due from the large customer that did not pay. So you can see how that affects our cash flow when the biggest customer doesn't pay on time. Any questions about cash flow?
All right, why don't we move on to budget variance?
Sure.
Page 32.
The only update to budget variances was the cost of purchase power through December, and we are at $78,000 over plan through the month of December.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to this, unless there's any other questions.
If I may, on that 78K, so that's actually consistent with the number I'm pulling here. If you add that to the 7% increase, that's maybe why you are at 11%. So again, I'd like to be able to see this number so we can understand.
Okay, got it. Okay, then let's move on to item 9B, which is our first ordinance of the new year, revising electric rate structure.
Can I interrupt right there? Actually, we already passed an ordinance.
What?
We already passed an 2201 ordinance. It'd be 2202.
You passed a resolution 2201.
Oh, that's a difference. I'm sorry. Apologize for the difference. Okay. Yeah.
Just had to educate me on that too, because I had it written as 2202 as well.
Okay.
It's like, no, that was an ordinance. You're wrong.
Okay.
So, oh, okay. I'll fix it.
Yep. Sorry about that. Yep.
All right, I'll take ordinances of 2200 for $50. Eric, the floor is yours.
Yes, so this is, so we referred back some stuff to finance. Most of the items in that were in the findings, the whereases, and talking to district council, there was no reason to redo that. It would actually require a whole new public hearing, whereas this ordinance could be implemented on its own and just replace the one subsection to capture what the board wants, since we're coming up on March. So this is the one that lets an owner use part of their year and part of the prior owner's year instead of forcing them to use the entirety of the prior owner's year. So.
Okay, so again, the only change we're making here is how the first year is calculated for when a property changes hands.
Correct.
And we would, starting with April, we would blend in their usage with the previous owner's usage rather than waiting a full year to do it, which
Right.
was which I think was the general consensus of the Finance Committee and what we discussed at the board meeting last fall.
Correct.
So, is there any discussion on this?
Well, I do have a little comment here.
Uh-huh.
First, I think there was some ambiguity in the original ordinance, so I would have preferred that we actually revise the ordinance instead of doing a subset of it. But
Yes, I understand that.
yeah.
The reason why we thought we'd go this way is this allows us to prove it without starting from scratch a new public hearing, so it could be in effect for this next AMU year. So
Yeah.
that was the reason why we split it into two.
That's great, and I understand, and that's a valid argument. But then my next point would be the few people that got badly impacted by this problem will not benefit from that because they'll be beyond it. So I wish we could do that retroactively to April 1st, 2021, instead of basically to the beginning of the other resolution. So the people that have been badly affected by this problem could benefit from it, because
Okay.
the way it is now, if we are making effective April 22, 2022, I'm assuming that it means that, is that going to be accounted at that time, or is that going to be at the new fiscal year, July 1st? First question.
Well, we calculate the AMU as of April 1st, so we can budget for it, and then the effect starts on July 1st.
That's what I understood.
Yeah,
So
okay.
that means the people who were badly impacted will not be helped with that system.
That's correct, but there are also people that benefited from it, and we won't go back and ask them for money either.
And the majority of people were neutral, neutrally impacted, me being one of them, one of those transfers. So my prior owner was 0.5, I'm 0.5. And we looked at the majority of this. It was 11 that were negatively, 7 were positively, and the remaining, whatever it was, 40 some odd were neutral. So to say many people were badly affected when it's 11 out of 769 is a bit of an exaggeration.
I guess the main point is just starting fresh is one option, and the other option would go back and try to claw back money from people. So it wasn't strongly one way or the. I mean, Eric went through what the numbers are. So the recommendation, I believe, the recommendation from finance, and I would ask John to comment, was to just start with the next batch. John,
the benefactors and the ones that didn't benefit from this, it's not a huge amount, and it's a fair amount of work to go back retroactively to do that. So yeah, the recommendation was this this ordinance.
are there other comments, Doug or Peter?
No.
I mean, the only other thing option that I would float, which I'm not saying I necessarily support, would be that you could not claw back money from people who benefited, refund the people who were negatively impacted, and then obviously go forward with this as is. So that would be another option that
Actually,
we could consider.
We can't treat customers disparately under the law, so we couldn't do that.
Gotcha.
Okay, are there any comments from members of the audience? Okay, I'm not seeing any hands raised.
Norma.
Okay, let me see if we're ready to vote. Is there a motion to approve, to propose ordinance 2201?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, is there any Additional discussion, or are we ready to vote? Okay, Peter, can you do the roll call?
Sure. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Midratanda,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornbrook, aye.
Okay, good. Let's now move on to item 9C, performance reporting and aquifer levels.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi, Brandy.
So starting with electric, you can see January, our production was up a little over 1 million kilowatt hours produced. And that just means purchased off the grid for the month of January. Actual metered was 866,000 kilowatt hours, which was slightly lower than our budget of 900,000 kilowatt hours, giving us a 17% loss for the month of January and taking us to 16% for the year. If we look at propane.
Do you want to have questions at the end or for each department?
Either way is fine.
So do you have any, 17% is not a great number, especially if your goal is 12, so we are 5% above the goal. But we didn't have any power interruptions, which tend to create losses. Do you have any technical understanding of why we are at such a number?
No, we did not have any system anomalies. The only thing that I noticed when I was doing this is that there were several more days in the billing cycle in January than there were in December due to the timing of our meter reads and billing, which might account for some of this. But no, we did not note any power outages or other things that would account for additional losses.
And yeah, and January was a much, we consume much less than last year, I think, as well. And that's totally dependent on what's happening.
It's something that we'll continue to keep an eye on.
Yeah.
I expect that this number will come back down in February, but I did note that as well.
Let's hope. Thank you.
And similarly with our things moving up and down propane, you can see that in propane for the month of January, we went to a negative 17% loss. In propane, this is very normal to see this sort of roller coaster up and down. January was much warmer than December and much less propane was consumed. We had fewer deliveries. We're at negative 3% for the year. And we normally end the year at a plus or minus about 2%. So we're year to date, we're looking okay in propane.
Okay.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead and move on to water.
Okay, water. Water for the month of January, we had a production from our wells of 1.945 million gallons. Of that, we metered 1.78 million gallons, which was slightly higher than our budgeted number. So our losses for the water department for January were 7%, putting us at 12% for the year. And then lastly, wastewater. You can see that our influent meter at the wastewater treatment plant measured just over 2.2 million gallons. Of that, 19% was I&I, unmetered water getting into our system. But that is down considerably from December, reflecting a drier month, dry and cold. So we're at 25% for the year on that one. So any further questions on the performance reporting before we talk briefly about aquifer levels?
So my general question, and it's true for all of them, is, so we have goals. So first, how this goal have been set? And I know for wastewater, we still don't have a goal actually. But bottom line is, what do we do if we are not reaching our goal? And I'm totally hopeful that electricity will straighten up and we might be coming closer to 12%. So it's more a generic question. So what mechanisms and how, is this just a report, or are we going to do something about if we do have a problem.
Yeah, we're gonna have to budget for projects and spend money to rectify these problems. When we get down to the last item on the agenda, talking about strategic and master planning, that is what you need to do to identify the issues and start spending money to rectify them. These numbers, we have small projects in wastewater going on, but there hasn't been a single project budgeted since I've been here, nor in the 10 years prior, to rectify these situations. So we're going to have to do that if we want to see a change.
Yeah. Well, actually, wastewater, you did improve the number dramatically, actually.
I said except for wastewater.
Yeah.
But we're all, we didn't get to do any projects this summer because of Caldor and staff being evacuated. So projects we had planned to do this summer for wastewater, for the manholes and line replacement, just went away. But there have been no projects budgeted for, actually the only one budgeted is the one we're doing with Dave Wrightley, which is the electric system analysis. And that's going to tell us what we need to start improving. But there hasn't been one for water. We just did our first water model, which is great. That's a first step, but we need to do a strategic master plan. What needs to be replaced? How much life do we have left on the tanks? What do we do with these 40 or 50-year-old water lines in the ground, some of which are asbestos concrete pipe? So, and like I said, the Dave Wrightley study is going to help us what transformers are the low-hanging fruit to replace, which lines have the most losses. But until we have those things and until we actually budget money to do it, these numbers aren't going to change. So your point is well taken. There's essentially, aside from wastewater, there's nothing that we can do as staff to change these numbers without a budgeted project.
And I think the proposal you have later in the board meeting, we can review, and that would be to be more proactive about this. I think the way I look at these reports is we've got a goal that's an annual goal. And so unless I'd see a monthly number that was far, far out of range, which would identify some sort of emergency fixes required. If we're in the ballpark with the annual goal, I guess I look at it and think, well, let's see how the next few months go and see if it's coming back within the expected range. And none of these seem to be that far away from the expected goal, right?
Yeah, and John, since Peter and I have been on this the longest, I'd like to get his opinion. But my feeling is, when we started this quite a few years ago, we found a lot of issues with electric. Some of the meters were wired wrong. We were missing things. So we cleaned up all of the meters. So we got it down to the point where it's fairly stable, assuming there's enough production. When there's light production, then the percentage heating up the transformers affects things. Propane is fine. I mean, if propane were leaking, we'd have a much more serious problem. The water, we know there's some aging stuff in there, but it's never been at the level where we've been able to look at it. So we've put most of our energy into the wastewater, and I think we've done some pretty substantial things. And now we have the Caldor fire adding probably some new stuff, which we'll see in the spring. So I think that's kind of where we are with it. Peter, would you want to add anything to that?
Well, I would say that in prior summers, we've seen direct effects of the manhole lining and reducing infiltration, which reduces the wastewater inflow. And we weren't able to do any of that this summer, obviously. And I'm afraid that we're going to find some damage done by some of the Forest Service bulldozing in regards to that on the Fremont Fremont Road. But when we do these improvements, you usually see a pretty good response.
Okay.
So I just think going forward, we need to prioritize them, what we can afford.
All right, so we'll talk about this some more when we get to the later topic on priorities. Sure. Brandy, do you want to move on to the aquifer levels, please?
Sure thing. So included here in the packet are the number of days per month that residential units were occupied. And we're right in the range of a normal January. And also the aquifer level, the graphs and the actual read sheet from our operators. Our average for the month of January was 114 feet. And as you can see from the graphs, that's right in kind of the middle of the pack as far as 2019 forward. So just
Eric, can you move one page forward That's page 39. Okay, there you are.
And I'd be happy to answer any other questions.
Okay, thank you very much. So we'll go on to item 9D, an update on the wastewater treatment plant funding.
Yeah, briefly. So we've been going back and forth still with USDA, but I think there's a light at the end of the tunnel. I'm fervently hoping it's not a train, but they asked us, as I talked about the last couple of meetings, asked for, a lot of additional information. There's a new equity component with the Biden administration that we had to deal with in this new funding cycle, and we've done that. We've updated our CIP to include, as Peter alluded to, include some of the Caldor fire implications for our capital projects. I added those in there for USDA to show additional projects that weren't identified before that were now a reality just because of what had happened. So we did that. We wrote a letter of explanation as to why things had changed, which included, but were not limited to, the hyperinflation, the supply chain issues that are really affecting water and wastewater utilities, especially in California, especially on the chemical side, and the piping and valve side. It's really actually pretty terrible. 22 months out on a project for Amador Water, I heard the other day. So just based on supply chain issues. So updated all that. Kelly updated the form 442-7, worked with Tanya to get exactly what she wanted. And so we got all that to USDA. She's saying we are being told a week from when we submitted that. And yesterday we met, or I met with, and Standish met with CoBank, our bond counsel, Jones Hall, Steve Nicholas's staff, Dick Shanahan, to go over where we were. Really, the message I got was nothing had changed. We probably will, once we get our letter of conditions from USDA, we will want to schedule a special board meeting to adopt that. Hopefully that will be in the next couple of weeks. So we can get that approved, which would start the clock, and we could get our first draw done for our short-term financing for expended costs in legal, bond counsel, and Steve Nicholas is our consultant. But there is one change that will be coming, which we already talked about. So this is nothing new. The board's already heard this, but LIBOR is out and SOFR is in. It actually benefits us. From what I heard from CoBank, it actually will give us a slightly lower interest rate using SOFR, which is great. There was no talk of an increased interest rate at this time. So if everything goes as we hope, we should be meeting back here as a board in probably 2 weeks.
Okay, go ahead.
So can you remind us what's the interest rate that we are hoping to have?
I think our long-term interest rate with USDA was 1.75, right, John? And then our CoBank was low twos.
I think it was under 2.
Was it under 2? Okay.
Yeah, a little bit under 2.
Very good. In a 7% plus inflation.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I'm still concerned that CoBank, when they get down to the wire, might say conditions have changed.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Any questions? Questions for Eric from the audience or board? Okay, I'm not seeing any. So we're now going to move on to item 9E, which is a discussion of a proposed change in the structure. So Peter, this is your chance.
Oh, to recuse myself?
Yeah.
Yeah, just tell me how. Tell me what.
Just click leave.
Quick
and
leave.
Okay.
Bob, is I can put him in as an attendee temporarily.
Oh, okay.
So, or Peter, you can leave him to text you.
Well, if you can make him an attendee, that would be simpler, and then we can move him back. Okay.
Yeah.
Peter, don't go away.
Okay.
Okay, good. I didn't know we could do that, so this is much easier.
Yes, I learned that today when I had to move 3 board members over to be panelists. Hold on.
Aha.
Won't say which ones they are.
So you're saying I don't actually have to use the right link in the future? Thanks, Eric.
That's right. That's right.
I didn't
You're
say I
free
was
to
gonna
create
do
new
it.
work.
All right. Hold
Okay,
on. Well, it hasn't happened yet.
so, yeah, it has. I can see
Oh
it.
yeah, there it is. Good.
Yeah.
Mine's-
Okay, good. So we'll now move on to item 9E. And Eric, you want to
Yes, so this is.
give us the background?
Yes, so briefly, there was a discussion of the board of a reorganization of the departments to separate duties between water, wastewater, solid waste. And so working through personnel committee, we came up with a structure that we think works, which is to split water and solid waste into one department and wastewater into another department. In addition to that, to revamp the positions. So we would have basically an operator 1, 2, and 3. We only proposed to fill 2 of the 3 positions, but the reason we went ahead and created 3 was to create opportunity for promotion within. For if someone came as an operator 1, they'd have a place to go. So incentive for people to stay at the district, continue to grow in their careers. So 2 of these, so there's a total of 4 positions between the 2 departments. 2 will be filled with existing employees and 2 will be advertised, and we will fill the 1, 2 position based on the quality of applicants we get. And that's how we will decide which position we'll fill in the respective department. I did a salary survey for the positions across the board. We used the same mechanism as you'll see in 9F later on. And went through that with quite a bit of detail. Also talking to Water Talent, which is our consultant. I talked to them a little bit about the current climate, and we came up with these salary ranges as well. So anyway, this is where this is. Depending on where the employees go, we recommend salary adjustments depending on which position they end up in, and to make those effective July 1st. And we also recommend that this reorganization become effective on March 6th, which is the beginning of a new payroll cycle, to make it easier for Kelly and her staff. Looking at the salaries, it's an increase across the 2 departments of potentially between 45 and 100,000. However, we're going to look at solid waste as running the chipping program, which would be additional labor, which would be additional charges. So that could be offset with the new solid waste rate study. And we have someone available to do the chipping because we have an extra body in between these 2 departments. We don't anticipate any need for any increase in water or wastewater rates as a result of this reorganization.
So Eric, I just want to add that it's a net increase of 1 person because we currently have 1 open position.
It's a net increase of 1 person because we have 1 vacancy. That is correct. If you look at the org chart, this position is vacant, this current operator 2. So normally we would have 3, we will be going to 4.
Right, and that gives us some additional summer labor so we could support a fuel reduction program.
Correct.
With the labor. I also want to thank Bertrand at the Personnel Committee. I'm pretty sure you were the first to suggest thinking about this. So I thank you for that.
Looks great. I think that's going to be a good improvement and efficiency for the district. Thank you, Eric, as well, to navigate this thing. Yeah.
So let's see if there's questions from the board or comments. John, did you have anything you want to add?
I mean, we discussed this at Personnel Committee, and yeah, I think it makes sense.
I agree. Are there questions or comments from the audience?
Not seeing.
Okay, I'm not seeing any. If there's no further discussion, would someone like to move to approve this change to the organization structure?
I move to approve this reorganization of the water and wastewater departments.
Okay, is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, Doug seconds, Bertrand moved. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, then Peter, can you, then I will do the roll call.
Bertrand is the assistant secretary. He can do it.
Oh, that's right.
Right.
This is your opportunity
Absolutely.
of the year.
But the question is, am I competent?
We're gonna find out. Okay,
roll call.
so calm down and go ahead.
President, yes. President Epstein.
Aye.
Vice President Schroeder.
Aye.
Treasury Mitterranda. Assistant Secretary Peru, aye.
Okay, so it
So it's a
passes roll.
unanimous call. Yeah.
Okay, great.
Now I can
All right.
rest.
Yes, thank you very much for being available to fill in
Yeah.
for Peter. Okay, so we'll now move Peter back to the panelists.
Let me fast forward through this and I shall do so.
Okay, so we'll wait for a minute for that.
A lot of data. All right, give me a second now. More. Promote the panelist. There. Okay. Yeah, and Peter's back. Okay, so this is the balance of the salary survey, the biannual salary survey that we did. I'll walk a little bit through the machinations. I think it's a little bit interesting to talk about just for those who have not been through one before. So I'm going to see if I can get to what I want to get to. And it's not in there, darn it. Okay, well, so what we did is we use comparables entities and we judged how analogous they were to the district. We judged it based on 4 criteria. We judged it based on their population / customers served. We judged it based on their elevation. We judged it based on their proximity to a large city, anything over 100,000, which is a large labor center, meaning that people could commute, because Kirkwood is not a commutable community, for example. And then we also based it on, what else did we base it on? There's a 4th one, and I forget now. I was so wrapped up in it. But so anyway, so we did that and we used the formula to come up with how analogous things were to us. And number of employees was the 4th one, number of employees. Came up with a formula, and this is the same one we used in 2019 when we did the last salary survey and came up with that range. So I guess the shorthand is, if we're assuming 7% CPI, which that may be under now. I know the finance committee thought it might be over, but now a 7.5 in January, who knows where we're going to end up by May, which is when we set the CPI. But we just took the existing ranges and said, what if we applied a 7% CPI to these ranges? And what do these new ranges look like in comparison? So I'm going to short circuit to that. If you look, basically what it tells me is our salary survey and assuming a 7% CPI, our ranges were correct previously with this adjustment, which is what we do every year to the ranges. There are some positions that come in below the lower boundary of the new salary survey. So we are recommending that those people which are identified in the report as of July 1st be set to that lower bound. We looked at it through the lens of if someone got the maximum merit raise, which is 5%, would they hit the lower bound of that salary range? And if the answer is no, the recommendation here, as you can see for a few of these positions, is to set them to the lower bound of that range. Overall, budget impacts are very minimal since the total salary range is ostensibly the same. And I should note that this salary range includes water, wastewater, solid waste as well. So overall impact to the budget is de minimis.
Okay, are there questions for Eric on the survey? Again, our main goal of the survey is to make sure that we are consistent with similar organizations in terms of our range of salaries that we offer. So if somebody who's currently working for us was hired fresh, they would be in a competitive salary to working somewhere else. I'm not seeing any questions. I just want to say that I thought Eric did a pretty amazing job of going out and finding, I guess it was about 20 hiring agencies or utilities that had similarities to what we did, and then factoring those down and then going through and digging out their salary ranges for comparable areas. So I feel very comfortable from when we reviewed this in personnel that we've done a good job of making sure that our salaries do fall within industry ranges. John, did you want to add anything to?
Yeah, and I think it
Personnel?
was wise. I think it was wise to make the adjustment, given that we're in an inflationary period here, so we don't lose employees or find that we're unable to attract new talent as well. So I think that was another good adjustment.
Okay, are there other comments?
Not seeing any.
Okay, then we're looking, yeah, go ahead, Bertrand.
It looks reasonable to me. It seems the methodology was appropriate, and the result is looking good to me. Yeah.
Great. So we're looking for a motion to approve these salary ranges.
Motion to approve.
Okay, is there a
Second.
second? Doug, second. Okay, any final discussion, comments from the audience? Okay, not seeing any. Peter, can you do the roll call?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Okay. Epstein,
Aye.
Schroeder,
Aye.
Mitrutanda,
Aye.
Perot,
Aye.
Dornberg, aye.
Okay, thank you. So we're now ready to move on to item 9G, budget assumptions for the new budget. And I think we'll see some, I'm sorry, Bertrand, did you?
Yeah, I saw the scrolling, and there was this organization chart, which is great,
Right.
updated to the new. But is it possible to have one with actually the name of the people, at least once we settle the wastewater and the water situation, at least with the current employees?
Yes.
And also,
would you like me to wait till we get the 2 positions hired so I don't have to do it
I'm
every other
concerned
month?
it depends if it's a few months or longer. But also the snow removal guy, I think that'd be interesting to have one with who you have on snow removal and they never show up because they are seasonal. I mean, they show up with empty box, correct?
That's correct. I'm just not excited about updating that every year. It changes so often, and it changes within the year too. I don't want to be updating in the middle of season because someone quit in January and I hire a new person in February. For temporary positions, I don't.
Okay.
Okay, so continuing on with the budget. So really items G and H are interrelated, but we're first going to look at some of the budget assumptions for the new fiscal year coming up, July 1st, and then have a discussion about where we want to see our priorities focused as part of this budget. So we'll start first with the budget assumptions.
So really nothing's changed. I mean, snow removal is going to be determined based on where we are this year. We had a lot of additional repairs on equipment that we didn't anticipate. So we may be paying back less of the loan than what we thought. We also had to raise salary ranges to higher. So that's also going to have an impact. Although we are farming out that labor to other departments right now and using them for other projects. So hopefully that will help offset it, including building the powerhouse gates. That's one of the things we're using the labor for, as well as cleaning out fire hydrants. So this will flesh out as we get through March and April.
Was this the first change on the list?
Everything else is just the years.
Okay, all right,
Everything else is, if you look at all these, it's just the years.
got it. Okay,
Then just based on the vote we just took, it assumes 18 full-time year round, which is now where we are with the new org chart. Because of the adjustments, we're estimating a 5% salary increase, bringing some of those people up from the below the new range. So instead of the normal 3%, and Kelly estimated that amount at 65,000. And then in terms of, so any questions on that? I'll stop on salaries. I mean, I think that's what we just talked about, but happy to stop there. Okay. On operating expenses, I alluded to it earlier, supply chain and hyperinflation. We're going to assume a 7% this year and then 3% annually thereafter as we budget. I don't think this is going to go away anytime soon, unfortunately. So that's what we're going to budget, however we're going to budget our operating expenses. We just updated our USDA loan payments to include the upcoming 2027. And then our COP loan, you can see it drops off in August, Kelly, of 2024, I believe, or November? No, August of 2024.
It's actually, I think it's August of 2023, but that is in fiscal year.
Oh, right.
2024.
Yes, thank you. Yes, 2023. So that's good. That'll be nice to see that drop off. Although it was a source of consternation for the USDA Form 442.7 for Kelly, but we got it sorted. And then our Bank of the West drops off, and that is November. Correct. That is November of 23. That drops off. So
Yes.
We're dropping off 2 bits of debt, which is always nice. A little discussion about the USDA wastewater treatment plan. I thought it was appropriate to include it since it's such a big project for the budgeting cycle. And again, with supply chain and hyperinflation, we may have to pivot on what this project ultimately looks like, depending on where bids come in and those sorts of things. So we'll see what happens with that. Oops. And so we talked about this, the 5% salary increases and a 7% CPI is the other changes we assume in the budget. And the Finance Committee has reviewed this and concurs.
okay, questions, Bertrand?
Yes, my concern is on the wastewater treatment plan with all this delay and the inflation ramping and the cost of supply and whatever. Are we going to be under budget? I mean, is the project going to be over budget and having issues on actually meeting the capital requirement here?
I don't know, but I would expect so.
You don't expect so?
No, I don't know, but I would expect so.
Oh, you would expect so, yeah.
Yes.
So does that mean you should actually be a bit more proactive about it?
What do you suggest?
Well, let's look back. Let's try to price again this project. Actually, yeah. See, make sure you are not too off.
I didn't understand the first word. We should what again?
Look back at the project and the cost assumptions.
I mean, we have the cost assumptions, and I know they didn't have 7% CPI when they did it, when they accelerated it out based on the engineering news record. I know that's not in there, so I can tell you that the cost estimate is low.
Yeah. So at a minimum, we should try to do that, actually include the 7% CPI. I'm concerned the CPI is a general number, and for this specific kind of project, it may be even higher.
It may, but I'm just trying to understand what paying the consultant to go back and update the estimate would do at this point.
That's what I would recommend, yes.
What would that accomplish? I'm confused.
Let me ask a question if I can. Let's suppose that the total project comes in higher than that. Is there a limit to what we can borrow from CoBank or Russ?
We can apply for an augmentation from Russ.
Okay, and
bear in mind we're bidding this as multiple projects. We're not bidding it as one large project. So as we get closer to the end, we can pivot at the end if we have to.
Okay, so in my mind, it's not an issue that we need to proceed. The issue is making sure as we actually get real bids in that we can account for it through our financing to cover the cost, the initial cash, and then adjust it into rates if we need to. Is that
And the
true?
board will have the opportunity on every bid to accept or reject the bids.
Yeah, so my concern is there is an inflation, we all know that, substantial inflation. So basically all the numbers we have are under. And should we just at least increase by 7% this whole project?
Well, I think, it's been a long process with USDA. And they're probably the one that's less nimble. And so if we think we're going to get the commitment letter from them in a week, I'd rather get that commitment letter in hand. And then if we have to go back based on bids, which will be more accurate than an engineering re-estimate anyway, the bids are going to be what the bids are. Then we can go and look for further financing. I think CoBank, while I can't commit to this, I think they'd be very flexible and basically do the commercial loan for whatever USDA is willing to cover.
Mhm.
So if you look at the timing on it, to go back to an engineering study to redo it, or just to apply 7% and go back to USDA, I guess I'm probably more in the mindset of a bird in the hand. I'd rather get the first
Approval.
chunk done, and then as we get estimates in, if we have to do something, then we'll go back to the well. Eric, do you agree with that?
Yeah, so if we wanted to change the project now with the USDA, it's a brand new application, a brand new
Okay.
preliminary engineering report, versus asking for additional money at the end or removing components of
Okay,
the project.
so let's just go in with the assumption that we will be under budget. I mean, we'll be over budget. The project will be over budget. Yeah. Okay, that's a totally fair statement from both of you, and I'm okay with that too. Yeah.
Okay, good. Are there other questions on the budget assumptions? Okay, not hearing any. I think we're ready to move on to item H. And what Eric and I, and also, wanted to do with this is there's been a number of topics that the board has discussed over the last year or years. And I put down 12 of them. There may be some I left off, but for some of these, there's kind of a yes or no decision. In others, it's a matter of prioritization. And since these all require significant staff time, I want to make sure that as we budget and we think about projects, that we do them based on priorities. So what I'd like to suggest is first just go through, make sure everybody is on the same understanding of the 12 items, and then ask board members and then members of the public to weigh in on priorities and which ones they would do or not. So just to run through these first as a starting point. Item 1 says there has been discussion from people and from the community and else that is asked the question, is commercial electricity pricing consistent with the costs of providing? And I measure that since we took over from Mountain Utilities. I don't think it's our place to look back further than 2014 to try to do that. If this is true, then should a different rate model be considered? So that's it's a yes or no question followed by another question. The second one is the wastewater treatment plant reconditioning, which we just discussed. Item 3 is a question: should we transition from increase the level of services and capability that by the fire department, and one increase would be to move from voluntary to having more full-time firefighters. And Rick, I'm going to ask you, how many do we currently have that are salaried?
Salaried firefighters?
Yeah, 0. Okay. So we'd move from 0 to more than 0, and presumably in integers. So that's another question. The item 4 is, should we institute a regular, this says a summer chipping program, but we're saying just an actively managed fuel reduction program across the valley, of which chipping is an obvious starting point. Number 5 really was we were reminded of again this last storm. Evaluate expanding propane storage or other measures such as improving the efficiency of the propane usage. So the extended time we can manage between road closures. Right now we can make it. We've proven we made it 5 days. Should we consider that? Item 6 is the question. Various people have asked if we can or would provide EV charging stations. The first question is to say, do we have any suitable property for doing that? If not, then it's a moot question. Item 7 is expanding what the fire department offers to have more EMS level medical emergency services and how to pay for it. We had a discussion last year, the year before, about the ambulance and what it would take in order to be able to have that online and provide it. Also, there's minimum support for emergency services by the resort. So some of this would be thought in a more integrated fashion. Item 8 would be a project of deploying heat pump retrofits, encouraging the deployment and supporting them, and including partially doing one within our own building. Item 9 then is evaluate and revise all the connection fees across all utilities. Item 10 would be looking at re-permitting the wastewater treatment plant so we can expand it to our full capacity. Item 11 would be to look at the trade-off between using batteries instead of generators as our backup. And then 12 would be developing, we think of it as a 5-year strategic master plan that would go across all utilities. So we'd have a 5-year plan to work from across all the utilities. So there could be others to add in, but that was the starting point. And our goal is to get all the board members and members of the public to say what you do or wouldn't do off of this and how you'd prioritize. So I'm looking for who would like to go first. I see John raising his hand. So tell us your thoughts on any of these, and we'll be taking notes and try to consolidate it for the next board meeting.
I just wanted to expand on what I think fits into items 3 and 7, which is 2 things that are in the committee that Doug and I are working on, and Bob, you were involved in a meeting today on that as well, which is, we're trying to tap into state funds to try to get some capital equipment for fire emergency services and such. And so, it's already a project in flight, and it seems to be, shows some promise and should be, I think, pretty high priority. So if you think about that in the context of 3 and 7, I think it probably makes 3 and 7 more compelling than if you didn't have that component. And the other project that is in that same committee is the idea of trying to extract some value from the 8,000 to 12,000 visitors we get on a big ski day. And that was the idea, to do a property tax increase based on some proxy like parking spaces that would essentially have the resort paying a bit more, but they seem like they're willing to pay more for those services if there's an increased level of service. So those are 2 things that are already in flight. And I think they're pretty compelling, and they don't jump out of the sentences that were behind 3 and 7, but I think they're part of 3 and 7.
Yeah, that's a good point. And some of this is saying, although we escaped the Caldor fire intact, it could have been worse, and we should be preparing and thinking about, how can we provide the best safety and support for the next incident that's going to occur.
Right.
I mean, I appreciate having this conversation. I think it's important. I think the challenge that I am having thinking about this is that, the but-for world of some of these things, if we don't do them, is hard to quantify in my brain, like if we don't do wastewater treatment plant reconditioning, does that mean that we will not have the ability to process wastewater? Versus if we don't review powerhouse generators versus batteries, that just means that for another year, we will presumably not have batteries in the foreseeable future. As you know, it's like the but-for world of the cost of doing the impact of not doing something, I think isn't very clear, because I don't think that these are all equal. And I think on the other side of that, the cost of executing any of these are certainly not equal. Like I imagine doing number 12 of master plans for all of our utilities is very different than answering the question of whether, you know, commercial electricity pricing is considered for residential and commercial. Like the orders of magnitude of the cost of effort of doing any of these things, because I think it would be like do 12 and nothing else, or you could do, you know, like, you know, I mean, so none of these are ordered, I think, in a way that I can easily balance trade-offs in either of those ways right now. And that's one of the challenges that I have with having a ton of opinions. I have some opinions, but that's just some of the things that I'm thinking about as I'm trying to think about prioritization.
No, that is certainly true. But what we want to accomplish with this is have a discussion, get our sense of things, and then have staff know where we'd like them to focus and which items might get pushed off for another year, and which ones we really need to build on.
And I had, you know, it is difficult to triage this for the reasons that Doug said. So I
agree.
I was trying to look at, well, you definitely have to prevent some sort of a disaster, like not being able to process wastewater. Or if we did run out of propane and froze people's pipes and had potential personal injury because of lack of heat, I mean, that would be a very difficult thing to face. Then there's another level, which is bringing revenue in, bringing money in, because a lot of the things on this list we'd like to do, but they're expensive. And do we want to increase rates or have to increase revenues to cover them? So the items in there, which is, you know, tapping into state funds or tapping into kind of a visitor tax, kind of raised in priority just because they're going to give us more resources to allow us to do more, as opposed to having to raise more revenue to do additional tasks. So those are some of the thoughts I had in mind when I was trying to rationalize this list.
I'm more in line with Doug, which basically, yes, there's different weight. I mean, some are actually much easier to put together than others. I'm thinking, for example, the chipping program is not a big, it's a very difficult thing to put together. But to be able actually to answer this question, we need a strategic master plan. So I think that's where we should start. Having a strategic master plan so we can assess what do we want, how do we pay for it, what are the funding opportunities that we can go after, and that would help prioritizing things, because there are some time constraints in all of this. There are a few things I don't think can wait a master plan, and that's wastewater treatment plant reconditioning. We cannot afford to have a major breakdown there, so I think that has to happen. The shipping program is pretty simple things to put together. I think we should put it because it's very important for our safety as well. And same thing for the commercial versus residential consideration. It's just numbers to look at, and I mean, I don't think it's a master effort. So this is the three things I would move forward with. Basically, the master plan to look at all these wonderful ideas. I mean, yes, it'd be wonderful to have EMS service in the valley, and yes, maybe there are some funding opportunities to it. And same thing for EV charging, there are going to be funds available, and it is. I'm not saying we need to do it or not. I just say a master plan should look at it, how feasible, and how if we decide to go, how do we do that? So that's basically my take, which is, I think, fairly similar to what Doug was saying. Is that correct, Doug?
I think so. And I mean, I definitely agree that in general, I would start, to the extent that we don't have plans, we should have plans, so that we can at least have a direction and deviate from if need be. So I would probably bias towards master planning first, And we've already started that a little bit, and some of these topics are already being discussed in some ways in our temporary committee that's related to power in some of these areas. But I do think that for other utilities and all utilities that we should have plans that we can work against. And I think a lot of these topics would come up as part of those things. But as Bertrand said, I agree. Like there are small things that we could consider, like a chipping program that might be obvious to come out of a master plan that we could institute without having to go through it all first. But there are larger things of like, when would we switch over to batteries and mothball generators? That's a larger question that is not nearly as short term. So I think that would be a longer term question that I would push off if we were resource constrained today.
Okay, there are two hands raised. So Peter, why don't we get some comments from you, and then we'll go to Beth, and then whoever SCTE is.
Okay, well, I think obviously reconditioning the wastewater treatment plants are top priority, and we've known that for 3 or 4 years. And I realize that the financing has been tough, but I think we know what we need to do there, and we need to stick to it. The second item I would think is fuel reduction in the valley. If the place burns down, you can have all the master plans in the world and it doesn't do you any good.
Hopefully it burns down the master plan first.
And the third item I think is where we're under evaluating, and that's revising the connection fees. I see an opportunity there. I mean, we've been in a pretty much a real estate building slump, and that we're obviously coming out of now. And I think we need to have those fees ready to go. Those would be my 3 priorities.
Okay, excellent. Eric, why don't we go to Beth McAllister next then?
Hi, thank you. I just would like to speak for the Kirkwood Firewise Committee. And we would support obviously any priority topics that have to do with fire prevention, fuels reduction, and fire safety. So it's really great to see items 3, 4, and 7 on there. I know when we talk to Chief Ansel, there are communities that we can benchmark that provide really a lot of services through their fire department. So we're hoping that we can transition. I mean, that would be great to see KBFD transition from a volunteer fire department. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Eric, should we go to SCTE? Please identify yourself. I haven't figured out what the acronym is.
We can't ask people to identify themselves, but it's
Oh,
Carolyn.
I'm sorry.
But it's Carolyn Scott. I know that.
Oh, okay.
She has to unmute herself now, and she can talk. Carolyn, you need to unmute yourself.
Can you hear me?
There you are.
We can.
Okay, I'm sorry. That's somebody put this on me as Scotty. I think emergency services such as the fire department and the propane storage are the most important because we are so isolated. I've been there so many times in the last 35 years when you can't get in or out. The county can't get in or out. Other fire departments can't get in or out. Sometimes even Caltrans can't get in or out. Some of these other things like EV charging, honestly, it can go or not go. I don't really care. I think the emergency components of our services for the visitors, for the owners, for the resort is by far the most important thing. That's my comment.
Thank you very much. And Eric, I see that Anne Fleur has her hand raised, so we go there next.
Hello.
Hi.
I just wanted to echo that I really think that doing a master plan is so critical. And I think a lot of the items here fall into ideas and directions that would be evaluated as part of creating a master plan and in that long-term planning process. And that I'd encourage to kind of identify the couple things, handful of items that are really critical to continuing operation and moving services in a direction that need to be addressed now. I think defensible space, I agree, is really critical. We can't continue waiting on that one. But then looking at the rest of these as how they can be wrapped into a master plan process as we move forward. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I'd like to give staff an opportunity to weigh in on this. So Eric, why don't you go first and give us your thoughts?
Sure.
But
So
then I'm going to call on everybody else, so be
yeah,
prepared.
that's fine. And I'm sure there'll be questions. I mean, from my perspective, there's a few of these things fall into line pretty clearly. And I understand Doug's questions, because a lot of this is, historical knowledge, and it's a lot of things that we just know, and maybe we forget that other people haven't been tracking for 4 years. But in my mind, obviously the wastewater treatment plant is a priority. To answer Doug's question, if we don't do that, yes, it's going to fail, and we're going to have to kick everybody out of the valley, ostensibly. It's an old plant, deferred maintenance for 40 years. It's overdue for time to fix it. I mean, my first day in here, I was very concerned about it. And that's as my professional civil engineering opinion, that it was not in good shape. I'm glad they put membranes in, but there's a lot of other stuff that was just set to the side in order to switch to that. And we're gonna have to replace those membranes in the next year or two, at right now to about the tune of about $1 million, where we'd only been budgeting about $500,000. So that's a big deal. And that's not even part of the reconditioning project. That's a separate capital budget item. The other thing I think that's probably the most important is the master planning strategic plan for all the utilities. Peter's right, connection fees are critical. I mean, right now there are 3 subdivisions that have approached the district. We were at TriTac today, and there was discussion of one of them. But there's 3 subdivisions, and they're not insignificant subdivisions coming to the valley. But until we have a strategic master plan and know what our long-term capital really needs to be, we can't set those connection fees, because that's going to tell us what our replacements are, what are we replacing every year, et cetera. I mean, we do our best with the capital plan, but this would be a full detailed analysis. So I think connection fees would follow that as the next logical step for that. Wastewater treatment plant re-permitting, I think that can follow the wastewater treatment plant reconditioning, or can run hand in glove. We're just getting nowhere with the state, but I think that's an important one to do. And the other thing, the rest of these are, they fall really far down the list over the ones I just highlighted. But the other thing that I would add is a 13th one. We hear a lot of talk, and a lot of people mention, oh, there's grants out there. Oh, just go get grants. Oh, there's going to be a lot of money available. I think we should hire a grant specialist, a consultant, to do nothing but grants and search on our behalf, because the workload currently on staff is precluding us from doing only the lowest hanging fruit in terms of grants at this point. And I think if we're going to, believe that there's all this free money out there, we should probably hire someone to go find it, because it's not there and it's not free at this point. So I think that's something the board should consider in the next budgeting cycles, to hire a grant consultant to try and find those things to help offset the cost of some of these components as much as we can. So there is that. The other thing I'll add that's not on this list, I think Doug and I have been talking a little bit about, but in order to realize the public benefit charge to use it, we're going to have to do a needs assessment first, which means we have to hire a rate consultant, and we can't use PBC funds for that. So that's going to be something else we're going to have to do before we can even set the PBC, because we have to do a needs assessment before we can set the low income plan. So that's per district council. So those are other things. I mean, just there's so many moving parts. And, I think it's good to have this laid out, especially I think the strategic plan will help in the succession plan, which has been a goal of the board as well. So if any one of us gets hit by a bus, we still know which way we're going. It also keeps the board on track from changing direction, doing a 180 on a dime and staff trying to pivot and having a lot of wasted effort. I think this also helps in that aspect. So from that perspective, strategic plan, hire a consultant to come in and build that for us across all the utilities. Maybe we could skip on propane. That's a discussion to be had. I think we talked about it at planning, whether we want to do that or not. But that's my opinion. I don't know if Rick and Brandy want to add anything to that.
Okay, Rick, can we get your thoughts next?
Looking at this list, my number one, believe it or not, is wastewater treatment plant and the reconditioning of that facility, having gone through a few interesting times over the past several years. And then, of course, my second would be fire department 3, 7, and 4. And the more we do there, really, it's just going to help everybody. The third one was connection fees and utilities, as you know, striving to get each department to stand on its own 2 feet, which frees up more property tax to support other activities, pay off loans. The grant consultant, I totally agree with Eric on that. I think, we do a fair job of getting grants, but there's some probably missed opportunities there, and having a professional or someone that can navigate those multiple grants that are out there, and certainly it's going to be an asset for the district. And then my final one, which isn't on the list, but just something for the board to consider, is in the last couple of years, we've improved our employee housing by buying nicer units in some of the commercial buildings. And I think for retention, long-term retention, if we can continue to seek single family homes out there to keep staff in the valley, would certainly be an asset. And that's the end of my list.
Okay, Brandy, you're next on my list of squares. So
Hi.
let's get your thoughts.
I absolutely concur with everyone that the wastewater treatment plant reconditioning is the most important thing on the list. I also agree that a strategic plan should be right up there next, because propane storage and what we do there, whether it be increased storage or come up with a way to curtail usage, that is something that we do need to work on, and that fits right into a strategic plan. And also in that strategic plan, and with the thought of the connection fees that are coming out of that, just being prepared for the development that we think is coming. So connection fees, getting good, contractor standards and all of that. That's the top of my list.
Great, Kelly.
Kelly had to leave, so she exited.
Oh, okay, all right.
You picked fire on everything.
She did. Okay, I remember that now. Jess, would you like to comment?
Well, I'm not necessarily in a position to have comments on all these topics.
This is your chance.
But I do have some opinions. I personally believe the wastewater treatment plant reconditioning is priority number 1. And I agreed with everybody else on everything. The master plan, I think, should be priority number 2. And number 3 would be transitioning the fire department and looking at the level of service. Those are my opinions.
Okay, that's great. So let me try to summarize what's been said. Well, first of all, I think it's great to have this discussion. We can all take the wastewater treatment plant and say that that's a must-have, and if it costs more, we have to figure out how to pay for it, because if it fails, everyone, everything shuts down. So so that's clear. I also think it's fairly clear that that we really need to invest the time and energy to develop a strategic plan across all the utilities. And some of these things would fall into that, and probably some of the things that are off the list. And then third, the Caldor fire and the Tamarack fire, I mean, it's just totally clear that the FireWise effort, that we're in a period of time where we have momentum to really do some serious thinking about how we reduce the fire load that's out there, but also how do we improve the services. Also, in terms of the state budget, last year there were very, very large budget items that went for specific fire safety services that were applied for. This year's budget has $20 billion of discretionary spending that the governor has proposed into different categories, of which fire safety is a pretty large component of that. So if we, if there's a shot at getting this, and the other thing I think is, I think the state can recognize the role that we play in both assisting CAL FIRE, as well as if we look at the two major fires that we were feet on the ground, we were a staging area. We have two lakes right next to us to pick up water and deliver it. We have, we have diesel, we have backup generators. So we can play a very strategic role in the Sierras of providing support. So I think our chance to really do this exists this year and may not exist in any other year. So I think putting an emphasis on getting the community organized, having services available to support the community's efforts, and seeing if we can't start with upgrading the equipment and figuring out how we might upgrade the services, like Carolyn had mentioned. I just think that that's really timely. So that's a mixture of my thoughts and also a sense of what I picked up from everybody's comments. So let me go back to the board now and see if there's additional thoughts or comments, agreement.
My comment would be the wastewater treatment plant, it's already a done thing. I mean, we should not even spend time trying to think too much about it, but just go for it. And then the master plan is where we need to spend, so we can decide and prioritize. And like you said, there is opportunities with funding opportunities in the area of fuel load reduction and emergency services, and we should go after that aggressively as well. So that's very consistent with what you said.
Okay, good. Are there other comments? So Eric, let me ask you a question. How would you recommend go about proceeding with developing a strategic master plan?
I would recommend we retain a consultant to do it. It's
okay.
It's a lot of work, and it's not
right.
going to be cheap, but we could incorporate it in next year's budget, or we could do it now if that was a pleasure of the board. But there's a few local special districts in our area that have just completed them. Obviously they're much bigger than us, so but it'd be, I have looked at a couple of them just because I knew we needed to do them. But that would be our next step, would be to probably put it together, a request for proposals, and put that out.
Okay, I think it's the consensus of the board that you should proceed with that, and we should integrate it into this coming year's budget. If anyone doesn't agree with that or wants to modify that, talk now. Otherwise, put your thumb up in the air, and we'll know that that's the direction. Okay, are there other thoughts, comments? Anyone from the audience want to add anything additional?
No, and I think a lot of these are going to, as both John and Doug alluded to, both these are going to shake out from some of the temporary advisory committees too. Hopefully before the budget cycle finishes, and we can incorporate anything they recommend into the next year.
Well, I have a comment, which is, do you feel like we're doing any things that are distracting us from the things that are higher priority? I mean, we started from the standpoint of what's really high priority, but sometimes you have to decide that you don't want to do something to free up time to do the higher priority issues. So I'd like to hear feedback on that, if we think there's, because some of these things have really clear cause and effect, like, don't do the wastewater treatment plant and we have to shut down the valley. And so, and fire is compelling, but are there other things we're working on that are taking up time and energy and mind share that aren't as critical that we should put on the back burner?
Yes, I mean, the short answer is yes. I mean, you have grandkids, right, John? I mean, you've seen the movie Up. You know how the dogs are, Squirrel. I feel like sometimes how we're being given policy. The latest shiniest thing is what we're interested in doing, to the detriment of getting the other things done. I mean, I think, for Bob and Peter, I was brought in to fix a bunch of problems and run this like utility. And I think I've been making good progress. I just feel like we backslid a little bit this last year. So having this as a consensus plan from the board of these are what we're focusing on, as these other ideas, no matter how great they are, come up, the board needs to be cognizant of, no, we decided we're going down this path and we're not going to, look at the latest, shiniest fishing lure and get tossed in someone's boat.
Yeah, I mean, I could be more specific, I guess, if you look at some of the items on here. They're certainly worth being part of a master strategic plan, but they're things that we aren't going to act on for a very long time. If you look at batteries versus our existing powerhouse. I mean, I can't imagine anyone coming back with any proposal that would say to do anything in any short period of time about that. Are there others that we could get off the plate too, is I guess what I'm looking for.
I mean, the only thing I would say is, the board has to be cognizant, if we do implement 3 and 7, the budget, we're going to up the budget by $750,000 to $1 million for fire. So is it worth spending time going down that path? Does the board have the intestinal fortitude to really put that kind of charge on its customers? If the answer is no, then do we even spend any more time on it? That's a big low hanging fruit. Is if hey, we're comfortable dropping $1 million assessment on our our customers, okay, annually, then we should do it. And that's just current labor costs for professional firefighters and the well, you saw the proposal from AFPD.
Could I add something to that, Eric?
What's that?
Could I add
Go
something
ahead,
to
Peter.
that topic? Is that originally we had planned on raising the fire impact fee and revising it over annually, basically, and we haven't revised the fire impact fee in a long time. I mean, along with connection fees, I think that's something that we should look into, especially if we're going to have a growth period. That would maybe help make items 3 and 7 doable.
And I should look also at undeveloped properties, not only customers.
And I think there's sub projects of 3 and 7. Certainly, going after the state funding is very attractive, like what Bob just overviewed a few minutes ago. The property tax increase for based on using parking spaces as a proxy, I would say it probably doesn't have as big of an impact. On the other hand, it would bring revenues in to fund a higher level of service. So it has an attractiveness from that perspective.
I guess what I'd like to see the temporary committee work on. So there's things we absolutely want to do, which is have the ability to reduce the fire load and the opportunity to upgrade our capital equipment. And then the next question in my mind is, what are the increments that are staff related, like having full-time staff or EMS capability? What is the increment? Is there something that could be done for $200,000? Whatever, what does that look like? And then looking and saying, could that sort of money, what would be the impact of raising that sort of money? So it's knowing what steps are there, if any, that could be looked at.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay, I see there's 2 hands in the air again, so let's go to Ann Fleur.
Hi, yeah, so in just listening to these conversations, sounds like most of these items are items that really need to be discussed as part of a longer master planning process. And that making decisions about the level of service that can and should be provided by the fire department, making decisions about battery storage versus diesel or generator backup systems. I mean, those are all long-term planning discussions that involve how are these being funded long-term, how, and I think just speaks to how critical that piece is. I think that identifying the items that can't wait for a master planning effort, which seem to me are wastewater plant reconditioning from what I'm hearing and curbside shipping program, that a lot of this other stuff really is part of a long-term plan discussion and would really benefit from the master planning effort and help making those decisions on directions that the PUD should be going with those.
Good. Yes, thank you very much. Carolyn?
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. You know, I was seriously hurt there many years ago. I feel that the whole EMS thing and the fire department is important. We're a high-end community. The guests who come there by the thousands on major days are high-end community. They expect high-end emergency services. It has always concerned me that, I mean, I love our fire department. I think Rick and his people do a wonderful job, but we need to improve that. We need some full-time people. We need to budget, and we need to make sure that somehow the resort and the ski guests are paying a part of that. I just think it's crazy that this high-end resort we have with thousands of wealthy Bay Area skiers coming up there don't have reliable emergency services when someone gets hurt. I've been in that position. I had to drive myself down the mountain with a broken leg. It's just ridiculous. So I agree, you know, of course the wastewater is important. And yeah, summer chipping is important, but I think we need to improve our emergency services, and we need to make sure that Vail and the skiers are somehow paying for it, not just the homeowners. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I think we've had a good discussion and we know what the next steps are. So unless there's any other comments people want to make, I would close this topic and move on. Any final comments?
Yeah, when I look at the topic, sorry to drag this out longer, but there are a number of things. If we, you know, I agree with the need for a master plan or a strategic master plan, but what are the things that we want to address tactically? Like if you look at, we have some things that are in flight, which one should continue and which one shouldn't? It would be a question. Like we're going after state funding for fire resources. We're trying to work on how do we get more revenue based on supporting the visitors with emergency services. So those are in flight. We're going to keep doing those, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
We're doing the wastewater treatment plant reconditioning based on the financing coming in. Do we feel like there's any tactical thing we need to do about propane storage as far as some sort of emergency plan when we do run short, in case we have a 1 day longer closure than we had around Christmas? Do we need to do something tactically there, or are we content letting that sit until there's a master plan?
Brandy, can you comment on that?
I'm sorry, Bob, I stepped away for just a second.
Okay, well, your timing was suboptimal.
I'm sorry about that.
John, you want to repeat your question?
Yeah, one of the items on there about the, propane shortage. I mean, obviously it's a huge project and we don't really want to invest in increasing propane capacity, but do we need to is there a way to develop some sort of emergency plan of what we do if we do run into a longer closure than we did just a few weeks ago?
We've looked into that in the past. We have asked our supplier if they could bring up a truck and stage it here. Unfortunately, there's just not a lot of good options in times when we need propane deliveries. All the rest of their customers need propane deliveries too. So it's relatively unlikely that they would be able to accommodate that. So really, the only thing that we have in the planning stages is what we did, which is, try to get deliveries before the storm comes in, notify our customers to use less propane. And we could certainly do more public outreach to let people know what that means, what it means to turn down your temperature, to use less propane. But as far as any other activities that we might do, we don't have any good options.
It sounds like planning, like you just described, can go a long way to make us survive this exceptional situation. So I think just planning better and, like you say, community reach and describing, for example, people with snow melt should turn off their snow melt, and things like that consume a lot of propane are not essential. And so I would definitively, that give us the time to have a master plan in place to decide what we do. And so, but in the meantime, yes, I would definitively planify what you've done last time. So even before the storm arrives, once we know it's coming, warn people so they are conserving energy, propane and stuff like that. And we should be able to sustain even longer road closure if we do that.
I just want to clarify, there is no more snow melt in the valley that's on.
Ah, good. I thought so the resort is no longer doing
No,
the.
Plaza turned it off 2 years ago. Meadowstone turned it off this year.
Okay, thank you for the clarification. So that clearly would not be of any help this time around. But nevertheless, when you send your email to the community, there was a good impact on the level of consumption. So there is still room on community reach.
Right. Okay, good. Let's, Anne-Fleur, you have an additional comment, and then we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, thanks. Just on the propane issue, I just wonder if instead of focusing on how to have more emergency capacity, we could focus more efforts on how to transfer more customers off of propane to electric, so there's just less propane consumption in general.
Well, it's certainly what we want to do.
Yeah, so if we're
Yeah.
trying to move in that direction, maybe we can focus
faster.
the attention in that direction instead of patching a system that is going to be obsolete at some point in time.
Right. Okay, good. Well, thank you all for the conversation. Let's now move on to item 10, General Manager's Report. Eric?
So a couple things to update. Dick Shanahan is retiring, and he is still working a few days a week during the transition. He is giving his client list to another principal in the firm, Josh Horowitz, who I worked with for over 10 years at Amateur Water. Very good attorney for the district. So that's Barkowitz, Crunick, and Shanahan, our general district counsel, is who I'm talking about. We also have our labor attorney, which is Best and Krieger, and we have our energy attorney, which is Laisley, Braun, and Wynn. So we have three firms we work with depending on what the issue is. But Dick is retiring. Josh is taking over. He's been working quite a bit with me on some issues that have come up. So glad to have him on board, and glad that that's who got Dick's book, because I'm very comfortable with him. He's a really good attorney. I did attend the CMU legislative days. It was all Zoom. It was supposed to be in person and they pivoted and it went to all Zoom, but it was actually really great to see. The one thing I did, probably one of my biggest takeaways from that, and is that their budgeting cycle is much earlier this year, was the comment from multiple legislators, including the new speaker for the assembly. So he said that this is the earliest he's ever seen it. So I'm glad that the temporary fire advisory committee is working on behind the scenes on the fire engine, because it seems like everybody's starting really, really early. That was the takeaway from CMUA. And got a chance to meet quite a few legislators and have conferences with their staff and with other legislators that aren't even in our district, but sit on the committees that are relevant to us, natural resources, energy, et cetera. So it was really was a good legislative day. It's probably actually the best one I've been to in terms of the quality of speakers that they had. And I think that's all I had.
Okay, any questions for Eric? Okay, Rick, operations report.
Just a couple things for operations. One, I just want to compliment our seasonal snow removal staff. As you know, we've had a lack of snow for a little bit, but through Brandy's dedication and project lists, we've been keeping staff really busy, and there's still a lot to do. But our seasonal staff also stepped up and volunteered to reduce their hours, take additional time off, which is helping on the payroll side. And again, we're actually getting some things done in the winter, which we normally don't do. So thanks, Brandy, for doing that and continuing with that. The second thing is on Thursday, February 3rd, there was a small fire at Sun Meadows 1. It was stopped at the incipient stage. Essentially, it was a small mechanical closet that had a hot water heater in it, along with some other items. The volunteer fire department just happened to be training on the same day at the same time. And I've been giving my captain, Tom Harris, a hard time saying that he arranged the fire for some good training, but he assured me he did not. But the crew, the volunteers did an excellent job, and they took a lot of effort to not cause additional damage, meaning that they were able to run the water supply to the closet, put the fire out with about 25 gallons of water, and not flood the whole building and cause additional damage. And so this is, again, just the dedication for the volunteer fire departments, really trying to do the best that they can and really look out for the community. So, and unfortunately, whenever there's a big thing that happens, whether it's Tamarack, Caldor, or structure fires, it also increases the volunteer participation, and they enjoy big things happening, which is not a great thing, but it does help the fire department. So we're moving in a good direction right now, and I want to keep that momentum going, especially going toward wildfire season, where in this last year, for example, during the Tamarack fire, we committed our Squad 6, the new fire apparatus that the community provided our fire department. That apparatus actually earned the fire department over $17,000 for being on that fire. So there's some good things that can come out of wildland fire if we can send people out on strike teams. So we're going to continue to support that and the volunteers to do what we can to offset the deficit in the fire department. And that concludes my report, unless there's any questions from the board.
Okay, any questions for Rick? All right, let's go to the standing committee. So finance.
Yeah, finance, I think we covered quite a bit of finance with the WWTP financing, so I don't think there's anything to add there. On the ad hoc committee, we talked about that as well. We have a project in flight to try to tap into some of the state funding and get a budgeted item in there for capital equipment, specifically fire apparatus. And we have started the work on basically, I don't know, we need a good name for it. Maybe the visitor tax is a good name for it. Both are fire and emergency services related. That's it.
Thank you. Planning. Doug, you want to add anything to what you already put in the packet?
Yeah, I'll just refer everyone to the packet, but I did want to just verbally thank Anne Fleur Dwyer for applying and for the board on the consent agenda approving her appointment to the planning committee. We're very excited to have her. And I just will highlight then that that does put us at our 5 non-board member capacity. So we are a full committee now, and I'm very thankful for all of the folks who contribute to the planning committee. But everything else is as written.
Okay, Peter, ops.
We talked about most of it already. Brandy did give us an update on the meter protection, the propane meter protection project, and it seems like we've got pretty much 99% compliance on that. And we also talked a little bit about the propane tank replacement schedule. And actually, although the tanks were built in the 50s, surprisingly, the condition of them is rated as pretty good. So that's good. One positive thing.
Peter, I was going to say I was built in the 50s. I'm still getting reasonable ratings.
Oh, you're just double boom.
Yeah. Okay, good. And next is communications, Peter.
Oh yeah, we're planning on having Dave Jones give a presentation at noon on the 17th of this month, and you could probably give a better report than I can because you're more familiar with it. And Beth McAllister, I think, is going to be the MC. Isn't that correct, Bob?
I think On's
going to do it. Okay.
I think so. Yeah.
On Oppenheimer.
Yes.
But they both did a great job on the first presentation, so I'm looking forward to seeing it.
Okay. Beth, did you have something you wanted to add in? I see your hand raised. Oh, I see your hand disappearing. Okay. Good. On personnel, everything we did was presented to the board already. So now it's mostly preparing for the budget cycle. Okay, so temporary advisory committee reports. So John, you already covered the emergency fire funding. So on the electric, on the power strategic planning, the committee met with Howard and got an update on some of his ideas, and then he actually iterated on those and made some additional changes. We also met with Severin Bornstein to get some of his feedback. And the next thing we're doing is we're pulling the data together and start to do some modeling and some what if to try to get a sense of what might work and what might not work. The biggest question is whether things are designed based on actual usage, which has its own problems, or by having models for each category of building, which also has its own problems. So that's where we are. And Doug, do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you summed it up very nicely. Thank you.
Okay, so we now move to general discussion. If any of the board members have items they want to bring up, not for discussion, since we, but questions or clarifications. So is there anyone
Well, I have
wants to bring up?
I have a question on the propane meter enclosure. So my understanding is at the end of the game, only one account had to be shut down. And my question is, with the level of control that we have on water, and also the fact that the stove can be considered as an auxiliary source of heating, especially for a full-time resident. My question is it necessary to also shut off the water service to that place? And we do have a leak system detection, a leak detection system that allow us to detect significant leak. And so this is my question. I want to get clarification on that. Is Was it absolutely necessary to shut off the water, and why?
Yes, staff believes in their professional opinion, it is necessary to prevent damage.
To shut off the water?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions, clarifications? Okay, so the next board meeting will be on Thursday, March 10th. We moved it due to scheduling conflicts. So it'll be Thursday, March 10th at 2 p.m. And I thank everybody for attending.
Wow.